How much money do franchises actually make? And why is this information so impossible to find? We're going to take a look at 5 of the biggest names in food today and how much owners are actually making. We're also going to compare the food franchise earnings with other popular industries like beauty, cleaning, senior care, staffing, and more. We're going to end up exploring franchises that can make as much or more as some of the big name food franchises for an investment that is 10 times less. Today on Franchise City. You know, everybody thinks they want to own a food franchise. And when I ask people why, nobody really has a good answer. They think that food franchises are the biggest moneymakers. But according to a Franchise Business Review report, 51.5% of food franchises earn profits of less than $50,000 a year. Only about 7% of food franchises have profits over $250,000. The average profit for all restaurants in the report was $82,033. So you can see only a very small amount of food franchises earn good money, and many owners who are out there are struggling or just bought themselves a job. Keep in mind also, if you're looking at a very established big name food franchises, you're going to get the leftovers in terms of territory. In most cases, the owners that are making the most money are the ones that got their locations a long time ago. They received the best territory. Now, this is an argument that we often hear. Somebody knows somebody who knows someone who owns 10 Dunkin' Donuts location and they made a lot of money. Well, yes, but they bought them 20 years ago. There's 20 years worth of competition that has built up since that time. So we're going to be looking both at gross and net revenues today for our aspiring entrepreneurs. Annual gross revenue, that's the total amount of money that comes into your store for all goods sold. Net income is how much money is left after you pay your rent, your payroll, your royalties, insurance, and everything else. Net, that's really the important number, because who cares if you're earning 10 million if your expenses are 11 million? Now, there are other important numbers like discretionary income and EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. We're going to cover those in a future video today. We're going to keep it simple. The single highest grossing food franchise on the QSR 50 is Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A, an average store, generates $4.16 million a year, and your investment to get into a Chick-fil-A is only $10,000. But Chick-fil-A has a very different franchise model than other franchises. Owners do not receive a traditional revenue split. They don't have any ownership of the store. You're going to earn a solid 6 figures. You'll have limited risk. You'll be part of a great organization with traditional values, but you don't own the store or ever gain any equity. And now, it's also very difficult to get a restaurant. Chick-fil-A receives tens of thousands of applications every single year. They typically open between 80 to 100 restaurants. Buying a Mickey D's, that's going to cost you 1.2 to 2.2 million. That's not including your real estate. Now, a lot of people think that these big numbers include real estate. They absolutely do not. Now, we're going to cover what the expenses actually are involved in starting a food franchise in a future video. But the single highest earning franchise in the entire McDonald's system in the USA in 2019, these were stores that were open for at least a year, grossed over $12 million. The lowest location, open at least a year, generated only $557,000 gross. Now, the average system-wide gross revenues for stores that were open for at least a year are $2.8 million. But the question that most people want to know, how much does the owner actually keep of that? Now, keep in mind your expenses, your employees, your rent, your insurance, your royalty, your food costs, all of this adds up. Now, in these cases, your location also has a huge impact on profits, because rents in certain cities are very, very high, as are staffing costs in some states. So if you're in a high traffic area with low rent and low payroll, that's the perfect scenario, but it can be hard to find good territory still remaining. Now, keep in mind, McDonald's franchises can and do lose money. Some can net $500,000 or more. But the general consensus is that a reasonable average net expectation for a McDonald's restaurant is about $150,000 a year. Opening up a Burger King restaurant, that's going to set you back between 1.8 and 3.2 million. Mean average sales of traditional locations for franchisee-owned stores that were open at least a year again was $1.4 million. Now note, the average gross revenue for a Burger King is about half of what a McDonald's location is. Their highest grossing store across the entire system in the USA was 4.3 million, which is about a third of the McDonald's highest grossing store. Again, your rent costs, your local expenses, and all these other factors are going to greatly impact your net, what you're taking home. However, a 6% net revenue figure seems to be the reasonable average. That puts a Burger King franchise profit, single store average, at about $85,000 a year. Now again, some locations lose money, some are earning far in excess of that number. Dunkin' Donuts. So their financials in their FDD break down earnings throughout the entire country by region. So at the high end, if you have a drive-through freestanding building in the Northeast, you're going to average about almost $1.4 million. And at the low end, a freestanding restaurant with no drive-through in the West, you're only going to be taking home $974 as an average. Your cost to open a Dunkin' Donuts is about $465 to $1.5 million, again, not including your real estate. Dunkin' brand's average net revenues are estimated between about 8 to 12%. Again, that can fluctuate. We're going to say 10% average. So if your store is doing about $1 million, you could expect a profit of about $100,000 a year from your Dunkin' Donuts. The last food franchise that we're going to look at on the list today is Subway, and the average cost to open a traditional location is about $233,000. Now, unlike the other franchises we spoke of today, Subway does not indicate earnings in their disclosure documentation, but we can get that data from the QSR 50, and we can see that an average Subway location grosses just over $400,000. Now that's 10 times less than an average Chick-fil-A. Subway is actually the second lowest on the chart, with only Baskin-Robbins lower at $360,000 a year. Now, sluggish revenues are very likely a big reason they closed another 866 stores last year. Now, even at a high 10% margin estimate, an average Subway single store is going to net you about $41,000 a year. Again, some locations lose money, some make a lot more. That's just an average. So you can see that most people's perception of food franchises being these huge moneymakers is not quite valid. There are some food franchises out there that have 20% margins or higher, but you need to know where to look. Multi-unit owners, they can do very well. They've built up an empire, but a single location, unless you have a great spot, is not a lot of money. But let's take a look at some other industries just to compare, and I'm going to show you a couple of industries that can make as much or more as the top food franchises with 1/10 of the cost. So first off, hair salons, barber shops, and beauty franchises. And I'm going to use data from one of the biggest brands. These are locations open at least 2 years. Their gross revenues averaged $371,000, expenses about $293,000, giving a yearly operating cash flow average of $77,000. Now note that this is referenced in their FDD as cash flow, not net income. Now there are several emerging beauty and niche concepts that do have higher numbers, up to about $90,000 as an average net. Keep in mind that most owners who purchase these salons, they're looking for a semi-absentee or passive ownership situation. So these people are usually keeping their jobs while they start their first salon. They ramp up from there. Now, the average number of salons in this system that's owned by franchisees that we referenced above, after 5 years, the average number of salons owned is 6.5 units. So most owners, they start with one and they ramp up to several. That's where the money is. Now, you don't make a lot with a single location, so multi-units is the way to go. Now, the problem that we're running into with these very established brands is territory availability. So part of what we do here is help buyers determine what brands are available and have open contiguous territory and make the most sense demographically for their region. Now, there's some very cool emerging franchises that offer unique experience along with the haircut, like serving beer, even scotch to customers. and several brands that actually have a membership haircutting model, which I think might be a game changer in the industry. Also helps owners have a more predictable revenue. Now, your investment to start a single salon is going to range from about $150,000 at the low end to about $500,000 at the high end. Now, most brands, they're looking for a minimal liquidity, so cash you have available about $100,000 to $300,000, and a net worth between $200,000 to $1 million. Now, the requirements in some states like New York, California, that's going to be higher. Next up, childhood education franchises. So these are franchises like Sylvan or Kumon. I'm not going to give you the top name, but I'm going to tell you the number one highest earning franchise in the childhood education space grosses an average of $501,000 annually, which is actually 53% higher than number two, their closest competitor. Now, these numbers can be deceptive because the footprint size of your location, your cost of rent, are going to have a huge impact on your bottom line. And some franchises have larger footprints than others, and some franchises don't have any necessity for a location at all. Cleaning franchises, I know many of you are interested in this. The single highest grossing franchise in the cleaning space generates $1.3 million a year. Top 1/3 of their franchisees are at $1.9 million average. Your investment to start a cleaning franchise is between about $150,000 to $200,000. That's including your working capital over the space of about a year. So that's money that stays in your bank. Now, this model is not to be confused with buying cleaning contracts. Those are scenarios where you're investing about $1,000 to $10,000. Totally different model with a much smaller investment. We're not going to cover that here. Also, not to be confused with master franchise cleaning, which is more about selling franchise contracts. So a master cleaning franchise, it's a great business for people who have sales experience, and the average gross for a cleaning master franchise is about $2.8 million annually. Top earners at almost $6 million. So a master franchise, you're looking at an investment range between about $240,000 to $400,000. Senior care franchises, massive growth industry right now. 10,000 baby boomers turning 65 every single day. That trend is going to continue for many years. Now, most of these franchises, they provide in-home care to seniors. So owners are hiring their managing teams of caregivers. Now, not all franchises in this sector earn millions of dollars, but some do, up to $1.5 million. So you can potentially generate the same revenue with a senior care franchise as a Taco Bell franchise. They do about $1.6 million a year on average with a much lower investment. A Taco Bell franchise, that's going to cost you $1.6 million on average to open. A senior care franchise is about $100,000 to $150,000. Now, we also have a senior care franchise in our portfolio with a territory that generates an incredible $30 million a year. Now, note that's almost 3 times higher than the highest earning McDonald's location, and that's a $2.6 million investment. Now, we're going to end up with staffing franchises, and we've covered this industry before here on the channel. Huge potential gross revenue, almost $6.5 million a year gross from an average mature office. Now, we've seen single locations over $20 million. Your investment for a staffing franchise, about $150,000, including your working capital, so 10 times less than some of the big food franchises. So the million-dollar question, literally, why doesn't everybody just buy the top senior care or staffing franchises? It's a 10 times lower investment with million-dollar earnings. Well, firstly, people just don't know how much franchises make. It would take years to call every single franchise. There's almost 4,000 of them out there, complete their applications, wait for the FDD to determine the highest earning brands. Now, that's why smart investors call us here at Franchise City. We have all that data available on file to help you make a better decision. But even more importantly, not everyone has the skills or the background to successfully operate a senior care or staffing franchise. Now, if you are a bad fit, even with these top franchises in those sector, you're not going to make a lot of money. A Taco Bell or McDonald's, people walk in, they buy a taco, they buy a burger. It doesn't matter if you have limited business skills or are not a good communicator. Senior care, staffing, pretty much all service-based businesses in general, the owner is driving that business forward, and they really need to have specific skills or they're not going to do well. That's one of the reasons we provide a detailed skills assessment to all of our clients as part of our free service. So you can see why most franchises don't want you to know their earnings, because when you compare them with other brands, they just don't hold up. And that's a big reason so many people end up buying a job or making a poor decision. There are very few franchises at the top of their industry for earnings. Vast majority are just mediocre. Now, even if you do get access to their FDDs, the numbers are almost always gross revenue. Franchises, they collect royalties on gross earnings, so they don't track the net amounts. We help our clients get those net numbers. There's always ways to go about that. So the key here is to find the most profitable franchise that is best suited to your skills, your demographic, your market demand, and other criteria. That is how to maximize the likelihood of your success. And lo and behold, that's exactly what we help people do here at Franchise City. You can learn more about our free service above. Please like and subscribe. Hit that bell for updates. Thanks for watching.
You are listening to Franchise City, a better way to buy franchise.